Hi, everybody, from the Washington Times. I'm Tim Constantine, and as always, joining us for America, it's Dave Bozell.
Thanks,
Dave.
Tim. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you doing?
Good, great.
We were a little critical of the Republicans in the House of Representatives and the way they have conducted themselves this past year. But in the presidential race, Donald Trump has a real challenge here. He is not allowed to talk about his court cases. He is not really allowed to go campaign because in the criminal cases, he has to show up to court every day.
Yeah.
So you can't be bouncing around the country too much anyway while you're trying to show up in the courtroom every day in New York. How well do you think he and his campaign are handling the restrictions that have been put upon?
I got to give the president a ton of credit for staying in the race just from the outset. To know that particularly the case in front of Judge Cannon, the documents case was full of holes, and watch a ton of conservative intelligentsia say that was the best case of them all, and that case seems to have fallen apart. If you look at some of the unredacted documents, to know that perhaps the National Archives sent you boxes of documents to Mar-a-Lago that you didn't ask for, and then the feds show up the next day and for some reason that's an excuse to rummage through your wife's underwear drawer. I give the president a ton of credit for staying in the race from the get-go. Look, his hands are tied. His schedule is tied up. He's expressed that publicly and privately. He's ticked off that he can't go out and campaign more. He has every right to be ticked off. The campaign, if I could give some criticism to the campaign, I'd like to see more nationwide surrogates for the president. I think there should be a state surrogate campaign, almost a mini campaign across the country.
During the primary season, there was no really strong challenger. People expected a certain level out of DeSantis, didn't get there. Nikki Haley, when she was the only one left, still didn't get there. Who are the strongest surrogates for the president?
It's a good question. There's not a ton. I mean, if you become a strong surrogate, you almost become vice presidential fodder. I mean, Vivek has kind of quieted down in the last month and a half. He's settled into his own podcast. People end up, if you're a surrogate, you end up sort of doing your own show. And because the money's good and the freedom to do your own program, and so there's not a lot of who could CNN call to be a guest as a representative of the Trump campaign to discuss the day's events of the trial. I don't know.
Right.
And I think that's the issue the campaign needs to address. They need to have more of those guys.
Whether you like or dislike Donald Trump, that light burns very brightly.
Yeah, and he's his own political director. Right?
Absolutely.
Right.
There isn't I think of Hillary Clinton, and I remember during her campaign where they would poll test people and then decide what she thought or what she should say. And I thought, you've been in public life for 40 years and you're not sure what you should say. Right. That's not an issue for Donald Trump. But the problem is with surrogates, no one shines that brightly. No one has that spontaneity. And again, whether you like him or dislike him, you're riveted to the screen.
I think if I were the campaign, I would tap into some of the congressional talent because these guys know how to use social media tools. They're Byron Donalds, Chip Roy. I know Chip endorsed Ron DeSantis, but he'll endorse the nominee shortly. These guys are experienced in front of the camera. They can speak to the President Trump's priorities because they're going to be asked to enact them. If they want to retain the majority. In fact, I would really encourage Mike Johnson and the team to link arms with Donald Trump and say, if you elect us together, this is exactly what's going to happen, A, B, and C. And if you have to take some messaging votes along the way this summer, go ahead and do that to show a seriousness of purpose. But if they can get united, and the president has been truthing about this in recent weeks, get united on a singular agenda with 2 or 3 priorities. If Mike can corral his team and the president can corral his campaign to barnstorm the country with those priorities, I think that's a winning ticket.
Final question. Election day is 6 months from this week. Yeah. Now, 6 months is an eternity in the world of politics. But if you had to, and you do have to, predict what's going to happen in the House, what's going to happen in the Senate,
right,
and what's going to happen for the White House, what would you say now, 6 months ahead of time?
Tim, I am a sucker for Alan Lichtman's 13 Keys to the Presidency. It's undefeated at picking the winner. I'll lean on his expertise. He is picking Biden going away. And the president needs to change the subject to put the Biden administration on defense on his economic record. And the House needs to stop messing around and pin irrefutably a scandal on President Biden. They do that, Trump can win.
I think it's concerning that I mentioned earlier that 70% of Democrats don't think Biden's there, and yet he is still polling ahead or even with Trump. Right. You know, in the next 6 months, the American media will beat the heck out of Trump day in and day out.
The worst thing the Trump campaign could do is sort of live in the Bruce Springsteen's land of hope and dreams. Like, well, the polls say I'm doing well, so I'll win. That's the absolute worst thing they could do.
Right, right. David, always a pleasure, my friend.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.
From the Washington Times, I'm Tim Constantine for America.